All right, Anna, it's all you, my dear.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome from snowy Michigan. We have probably a foot and a half of snow. We had 3 snow days in a row this week, so it's been an adventure. My classes at Hope College don't start till Monday, so this was just kind of an easing in week, but it is absolutely beautiful outside. But I've got my coffee and my office is very quiet, so I'm excited to have this conversation today. I think throughout my work as a spiritual director, discernment and decision making, this is it, right? Like, this is what we struggle with and what we wonder about. And so I love the way St. Ignatius guides us in this process through his own experience in a major life decision. So, because we may all come from a different background and knowledge level of this man, Ignatius, I'm going to give you some background stories and some of my favorite stories about him. So, if he is someone that you know so much about, just welcome that as a little reminder. And if not, I invite you to learn about this holy man, funny man. My students at Hope College find him to be quite amusing in many of his lifestyle choices and ways of life that led to his decision making. So settle in. I hope you have a cup of something warm, and we're going to get started. I think one of the things that I think especially as women, one of the things that we don't do when we're thinking about decision making is to pay attention to those feelings that we have within our own souls, those stirrings, those movements. I think we're very quick to ask others for their opinions. We're very quick to seek advice and seek counsel, which are all really important things. But I don't think that we are taught or that we spend a lot of time paying attention to those feelings within ourselves and figuring out what those can mean. So we're going to start with an opening kind of meditation. And the point of this meditation is to help you get a sense for what some of those like right now surface feelings are for you. And this is a beautiful meditation. My spiritual director, a Dominican sister, brought this book to my attention. And then if you know me at all, you know that then I had to go find the book immediately. And the book was out of print. And so I was so unhappy with her for like taunting me with this book. So I found a used copy. So I mean, I really feel like you need this book. Good luck to you. But my used copy is literally like falling apart right now. And it's such a funny little book. And it's called Imagine That. And it says using fantasy in spiritual direction. So everything about it is kind of bizarre and cool, and I love it. So this meditation that we're going to start with today is called the Store. And again, the idea is for you to just kind of find out about yourself. What are some of those right now surface level feelings and things going on in your life right now? So make yourself comfortable. If you want to close your eyes, if you want to, you can turn your camera off if that feels more comfortable to you. Sweet Kara's family is not feeling well. I'm afraid if she closes her eyes, she might fall asleep, but hopefully we'll keep Kara with us. And we will step into this meditation. Imagine yourself in a store. It's a pleasant store. Attractively appointed, comfortable, uncrowded. As you wander up and down the aisles, you find all sorts of things you like. Not in any special order, but all things very appealing to you. Walk around a bit, looking at things. As you are walking around, you begin to notice a remarkable difference in this store. Not only are there objects, but qualities, values, and principles are also to be found on the shelves. Perhaps they are there in token or symbol, but you have the conviction that you can select what you want and it is really there. Keep looking. Now you decide to select one thing. You pick the one thing you have wanted in your life very much. What do you select? Look at what you have chosen. Examine it carefully. Is it really the important thing in your life now? If not, you have time to replace it and select something else which you want even more. Now take your one important choice to the front of the store. Near the door, the owner of the store is waiting for you. You show the owner what you wish to take. The storekeeper looks at your purchase carefully, looks at you carefully, and tells you what it will cost. For the first time, you notice that there is no cash register. What the store owner tells you as the cost is something very precious to you. What is demanded as the price of your selection? How do you respond to the cost? So now, as we let this meditation fade, as you're ready, come back to this time and this place. Stretch if you feel like it, yawn, and then spend a minute thinking about how you feel. Using that like right now feeling as an indicator. What did you learn about yourself from this meditation? So just think about that for a minute. This isn't the kind of thing that we need to share out loud, but just think for a minute, using that right now feeling. What did you learn about yourself? And if you have a journal in front of you, you're welcome to jot down a few little notes. I see my journalers out there frantically writing. Cameron, I'm looking at you. So I encourage you, this meditation can be seen as just a little bit surface level and fun, right? But I think it also has some really deep pieces to it. And so having a conversation about this meditation with someone close to you, or your spiritual director or spouse or spiritual friend, can be really interesting, because I do think it's a really interesting examination of what we seek, and given those parameters, and what those right now feelings are. And again, it's a good way to just pay attention to what that like right now value is in your life, and to be able to use that as a stepping stone as we enter into the new year, and this conversation about discernment. So we're going to take this notion of paying attention to this right now feeling, as well as, if you know me, this is the next thing that's going to come out, as well as using our imagination, and see how these things can be related to decision making, both big and small decisions. I did this activity with some sophomores in college who were pretty undecided on their major, and I gave them Post-it notes and asked them to write as many big and small decisions that they were faced with that day as possible. And then they took those Post-it notes and stuck them up on the whiteboard. And if you can just imagine for a moment, we filled the whiteboard. And I think if we did that same, if we were all in a room, which Kara and we are going to make that happen someday. But if we were all in a room and I did that same activity with you, I think we could fill more than a whiteboard as adult women out in the world, right? Like the number of decisions that we make in a day, big and small, would blow most people's mind to see them written down. In fact, I think we could probably use the rest of our hour just writing down the decisions that we make in a day. So let me introduce or reintroduce you to my friend Inigo. And some people call him the first psychologist. Did you know that? But let me tell you a little story about him that you may or may not already know. One of my favorite books on this topic, and I will share this with the group. This one you can purchase. It's not out of print. Is called God's Voice Within, and it's by Jesuit priest Mark Thibodeaux. And so he's going to join us today in the form of his book, and we'll use some of his work as well. So let me introduce you to my friend. It all started with a cannonball. Inigo de Loyola was born into a noble family of the Basque region of Spain around the year 1491. His upbringing was full of the stuff of medieval court life, gallant battles, alluring women, shining armor, all-important honor, sword fights, card games, and lots of alcohol. Not a great start for a saint. Inigo was known for his tremendous passion and zeal, but he squandered it on selfish pursuits and petty, doomed battles. In 1521, he found himself rousing his fellow soldiers to keep fighting in defense of the fortress of Pamplona, despite their imminent defeat. When a cannonball hit Inigo in the leg, the Spaniards immediately gave up the fight. The conquering army allowed Inigo to be taken back to his castle in Loyola to recover. The fiery soldier was to spend many weeks alone in bed with nothing to do. In his boredom, he asked for novels about romance and noble warfare, but there were only 2 books in the house. And I think I've heard it told that it was his sister-in-law who was caring for him. So I love to imagine how this would play out, right? He's asking for these romance, exciting novels, and in she walks with 2 books, the 2 books that they have in the house, one on the lives of the saints and the other on the life of Christ. Can you imagine just for one moment what his face must have looked like when that was what she gave him? During those lonely hours in bed, Ignatius found himself deep in the revelry of daydreams. Sometimes he would dream himself as a heroic nobleman, fighting important battles for a feudal lord, winning the hand of a lady of high nobility, holding prestigious positions in a mighty kingdom. Other times, his religious books would lead him to imagine himself as a new St. Francis or St. Dominic, fighting battles against the Prince of Evil, pledging undying loyalty to the heavenly Lord, asking Mary, the mother of Christ, to be his queen. Then one day, he had an epiphany. He noticed an important distinction between the way he felt after his chivalric dreams and the way he felt after dreaming of religious life. Referring to himself in the third person, Ignatius describes this extraordinary moment of insight. He says, there was this difference, however. When he thought of worldly matters, he found much delight. But after growing weary and dismissing them, he found that he was dry and unhappy. But when he thought of imitating the saints in all the austerities they practiced, he not only found consolation in these thoughts, but even after they had left him, he remained happy and joyful. He did not consider, nor did he stop to examine this difference until one day his eyes were partially opened and he began to wonder at this difference, to reflect upon it. From experience, he knew that some thoughts left him sad, while others made him happy. This was the birth of his discernment of spirits and kind of being able to see these lasting, deep down feelings of consolation and desolation. My favorite part of the story isn't included in here, and I have heard that while he was recovering after the initial surgery, and remember this was like 1521, so anesthetic and surgery protocols are not what we know of today, but I have heard told that after the first surgery, Ignatius noticed how his leg looked and how it was healing, and he knew that it would not look good in his tights. And so he actually requested that the leg be broken again and re-operated on. Can you imagine the pain that he had to go through because it wasn't going to look good in his tights? I love that. I love that. So this is the beginning of Ignatian spirituality, and his thoughts on discernment still hold so much for us 450 plus years into the future. So if Ignatius was here and if he joined in this call, I think he would, if I may speak for him, I think he would resist us coming up with 4 steps on how to make a decision. If you look at the faces of the women who are on this call today, we are all in different stages in life and different places in life, facing some of the same, but some very different decisions. And I think Ignatius, he wouldn't want 4 steps to making a decision, because he wants me to be able to use this in my decision making here at age 46, and he wants my 18-year-old college students to be able to use it. He wants my mom to be able to use it. He wants people in different ages and stages to be able to use this. So I think he would resist 4 steps to how to make a decision, because I think what he wanted was for us to become a discernment people. He wanted us to make these decisions and this discernment to be a part of who we are, not a list of steps that we pull out only when it's time to make a decision. Some people have called this like an Ignatian intuition. And my daughters have been making me watch the Spider-Man movies. I haven't seen the 3rd one, but we just rewatched the 2nd one. So this whole spidey sense, or what does his aunt call it? His Petey tingle. And he really resists it being called that. It sounds awful. Can't believe I just said that on a recording for Live Today Well. But nonetheless, like this is kind of that spidey sense, that Ignatian intuition that becomes part of who we are, rather than a list of steps. However, that doesn't make for very good teaching. So if Ignatius would allow me I'm going to talk about these as a template or phases that we can learn to live into as we become a discernment people, using the conversion of Ignatius as a model. So if I may, with the help of Mark Thibodeaux, we're going to talk about 4 phases. And again, these are meant to be a way of life for us, not a set of steps that we pull out when we want to make a decision. The first phase is get quiet. The second, and this is the one most people are the best at. This is the one that you're going to say, yes, I've got this one, check. The second one is gather data, right? This is one that you all know how to do when making a decision. And that holds true for my students or adults or whoever I talk to. We can gather data. The third one is probably my favorite, and it's the one that maybe no one has ever told you to include in your discernment process. The third one is dream dreams. Dream dreams. I love that one. And the fourth one also may come as a surprise, ponder the dreams. So get quiet, gather data, dream dreams, and ponder the dreams. So get quiet. During Ignatius's healing, once he was feeling strong enough, he still couldn't stand, especially after he asked for his leg to be broken one more time. So he remained in bed in silence. And this is so hard for us to even begin to imagine, because if we are stuck in bed, we have so many things around us to distract us and to keep us from having silence. But Ignatius did not have that. He had no choice but to remain in silence. So ask yourself, what does silence look like in your life? If this is truly to become a part of who we are in our discernment process on a daily basis, what does silence look like in your life? Where do you make space for silence? I love going on silent retreats, and I usually do one at least once a year. I did my longest one ever last June, and I was able to spend about 5 days in silence in northern Michigan, and it was phenomenal. But there are smaller chunks and smaller ways that you can do this depending on where you are in your life. And once a year is probably not going to count as just the quiet that you need to become a discernment person. This needs to be something that we put into our everyday lives. So as we look at the start of the year and we look at goals and hopes for 2022, where can you carve out space that makes sense in your current life, in your current home, and all the things that you have going on around you? Where can you make space for silence? As we know, silence allows us to be attuned to that still small voice. It allows us to pay attention to some of those surface level feelings, some of those movements and nudgings of God in our lives. And when we're constantly moving, constantly distracted, it's almost impossible to notice and to hear those things. One way to incorporate this silence is through daily prayer. I love, and many of you know this about me, I love incorporating centering prayer into my daily practice, because the goal of centering prayer is, if we have to put a goal on it, I love that I have to talk about what the goal is, but if there is a goal of centering prayer, it doesn't come at the end of the 20 minutes when your timer goes off. You're not going to say, oh, I know the answer now. The goal of centering prayer is going to come in a moment of silence throughout your day. It's going to come when it makes you more attuned to noticing that nudging from God, because you are putting yourself in a position to be receptive to that on a daily basis. If you're not familiar with centering prayer, I'll send to Kara. I have a really good handout that I have found and used. as a guide, but I love to describe it as just if you were to imagine yourself right now sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch with someone that you can sit with, that words are not necessary. So this is probably not someone you don't know well because you feel like you have to talk about the weather and all the small talk. This is someone that you know you could sit shoulder to shoulder with in silence and it wouldn't be awkward. So if you imagine that, and then now replace that person with Jesus. And that's what centering prayer is. It's about 20 minutes of sitting shoulder to shoulder with Christ. No words necessary. You don't have to fill the space. He doesn't have to fill the space. You're not expecting him to give you a big message, and he's not expecting you to carry on the conversation. You just rest there together. Centering prayer often has a word that you can come back to when our minds wander, because they do. And sometimes when I do centering prayer, I feel like I'm only saying that word over and over because my mind is wandering the whole time. Sometimes I doze off, and I love to think that I have the kind of Christ who cradles my head on his shoulder when that happens, because you know what? I must have been tired. And if that was the person I was picturing and I fell asleep on their shoulder, that would be okay too, right? Centering prayer. I love the idea of having a consistent prayer spot where when you go there, you're able to feel that peace and that silence come into place, whether it's just a corner in your home. When my kids were little, I would light a candle when I did my prayer time in the morning, and then I would blow it out and go on with my day. But anytime I got a whiff of that candle throughout the day, it would remind me of that space and that silence, even though in that moment with little toddler triplets, it was probably not very silent anymore. And then, getting quiet allows you to be aware and attentive. So once you are honing in this skill of silence and sitting with Christ, then being aware and keeping your eyes open, not on your phone, not worrying about the next thing to come up, but just being attentive to those small movements of God throughout the day. So getting quiet. The second one, I feel like I don't have to go into very much because I know you're all experts at it. But the second phase is gather data. I know you've all been waiting for this moment. You can pat yourselves on the back. Gather data. Let me see if I can get you to think about with gathering data. So Ignatius used the stories, right? He used the stories of the saints, and he used the stories of the royal life that he imagined and remembered from his experience to gather data. So when you have a few options to decide between, we gather data. When I talk to my students about this, we're thinking about grad schools and jobs and classes. When I talk to adults, they're wondering about, do I move to another house? Do we stay in this house? Do I want to go back to work? Do I want to stay home? What does work look like? What are my goals for retirement? How can I still be a contributing member of society and feel like I'm a part of this? How can I be involved in my church? What's important to me? These are all the things. So of course, it's really important in this stage to talk to people that you trust, right? Like this is a really important part about gathering data. Talking to mentors and spiritual directors, holy friends, family members, spouses, partners, all of these things. That's where those conversations can come in. But I do think it can be a little bit more than that. And this is where I'm maybe gonna expand your thinking of gathering data. And I'm gonna start with a story from the Bible, actually, that's gonna set this tone for us. And we're gonna think about this idea of prayerful brainstorming. So first, we're going to consider the following Bible story in which God sends the prophet Samuel to choose the next king of Israel from among the sons of Jesse. God said to Samuel, I will show you what you shall do, and you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you. Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. When the sons of Jesse came, Samuel looked on Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Samuel said to Jesse, are all your sons here? And he said, there remains the youngest, but he's keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. The Lord said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. And that's from 1 Samuel 16, 3 through 12. And why I love this illustration and this story is that when we start gathering data, when we're facing a decision, we often think, okay, I have option A and I have option B. I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this. I have to decide between these two. These are the two. These are the only two. It didn't work out that way in the story, right? We choose between one of these two without ever stopping to think that there might actually be an option C or D, maybe even Q. So before we go any farther in this decision-making process, we should spend several prayer times. And again, this might be a little shift too, because how often do you invite God into that, into the what are my options conversation? Or is it more likely that you say, here's option A and B, hey God, which one of these, right? Have you asked him, are there any others I'm not considering? Because he's pretty amazing and he's pretty creative, and I think he has a sense of humor. So I'm guessing he has some ideas, right? So let's invite him in before we even go any farther in this discernment process. It just may be that there's some hidden viable option. I love this. Mark Thibodeaux says, some ruddy David out in the field of your imagination. Ooh, I love that. And it's going to reveal itself in the midst of this holy brainstorming. Holy brainstorming. Have you ever done anything that felt like holy brainstorming? So go back and ask the basic questions. What is the problem or the situation or the decision that I'm trying to make? Basic question. What am I trying to decide here? And then what are all of the opportunities? Who are all of the people involved? What is option C and D and Q? Mark Thibodeaux says, do not leave this line of questioning until you have come up with 1,000 new ideas. 90% of them extreme and unworkable. Then take that one workable solution that you had not previously thought of and bring that in to the decision-making process. You should have seen my student's face when I told her to not come back into my office until she had 20 possible career options or jobs available. She was a little concerned that she may never step foot in my office again. But she came back and she had a list. And by the time she got to 20, she said astronaut. And I was like, really? And she was like, no, but Anna, I was really running out of ideas. So make that list, number your list, make yourself a goal. Say, I want 15 or 20 possibilities before I even bring this to the process of figuring out if I might dig deeper into some of these. And then I love the idea of finding one of those that seems pretty preposterous and inviting it into the process just to see. So see, gathering data wasn't quite what you thought it was it? Gotcha. Now for my favorite two. Dream the dreams. Dream the dreams. So Ignatius was so blessedly bored that he had no choice but to go into these elaborate daydreams. When he was trying to decide what he would do after he healed, was he going to go back to the life he knew? Was he going to go back to the life of parties and women and alcohol? My students think this is the craziest thing they've ever been taught in college when I teach them these things. Is this what he's going to return to? Or is he going to change his life? Is he going to become a follower of Christ and emulate some of the great saints that he's reading about? So what he did was he imagined himself in both of those roles. If you can imagine for just a minute him back into that gathering data phase, I love to think about what his friends would have thought if he said, so you guys, I'm trying to decide if I should go back to my normal life or should I become this really holy person who is, kind of like St. Dominic. Can you imagine how his friends must have laughed? That was probably the preposterous idea that was so far-fetched that God placed on his heart that he then had to dig into. That was probably the one that he thought, okay, God, that's funny. I'll spend some time with it, but that's not what I'm going to choose. So he spent time imagining these options. Mark Thibodeaux calls this pray dreaming. Again, we're inviting God to join us in this process. This is deeper than daydreaming, although there's some beautiful similarities. But this is the process of inviting God to join us in the imagining. This is pray dreaming. It's allowing God to show us the marvelous and the holy possibilities that can result from each of these decisions. And you know what? This is countercultural, because I don't know about you, but when I'm faced with a couple of options, even if I choose one that seems kind of preposterous, but I'll give it a shot, the first thing that I'm going to do is tell you why each of them won't work and what's wrong with each of them. And yet that's not what this calls us to do. This calls us to enter in to see what's beautiful and what's possible and what's holy in each of these choices. Do you see the difference? Mark Thibodeaux calls this an opportunity to think crazy thoughts and seemingly preposterous proposals. So what does this look like for us? When you have a couple of options, when you've narrowed down your list to 2 or 3 that you're going to explore, at least one of them should seem very preposterous. Then what you do is you carve out some space and you let yourself pray dream. You imagine everything you can about entering in to that decision. What would it look like from the moment you woke up in the morning to getting dressed, having breakfast? Where would you go? Where would you walk? Is it a different town? Is it a different neighborhood? Is it a different type of work day? Are there different people around you? Some of this you might know for a fact. If you're trying to discern a move to a different city, you might know a little bit about that city. So you can insert some facts in there. Some of it you might just have to purely imagine, and that's okay. You have artistic license on your own pray dreaming. But you imagine with as much rich detail as you possibly can, everything about that decision. Imagine yourself living it, breathing it, walking it, talking it, sharing it, whatever it is. Imagine every detail. Have fun with it. Imagine like when you were a little kid embellish the details a little bit. Go through the whole day living into that decision. And then gently come back to your life and move on with your normal day. That's how we dream the dreams. We'll talk about pondering those dreams. And these last two phases, you kind of go in and out of them like this. So after a couple of days, you go back and imagine a second option. And you do the same thing. You, with as much rich detail, imagine yourself entering into that decision. Sun up to sundown. What would it look like? What would it look like to take on that job, to add that volunteer opportunity, to try a different place, a different home, a different neighborhood, a different church? What would it look like? And you weave your way through that day. Think crazy thoughts and seemingly preposterous proposals about each. Since we're going to overlap these last two phases, after you have pre-dreamed your way through that first scenario and you're moving back through your normal day, you're making lunch, you're going to coffee, you're feeding your kids, whatever it is, what you do is you ponder the dreams. So as Ignatius did, it took him a little while to figure this out, and he admitted that himself. But after each dream, he started to notice some differences in his heart. He began to notice that some of the dreams left him feeling dry and sad, despite his best efforts to create a dream of great possibility. In which dream, he asked himself, have I found pleasure that lingers long after the dream ends? So it's important to point out that these are not surface level feelings, right? It's normal to have surface level feelings about each of these imaginings that could be surface level scary, because anything new is a little bit scary. Maybe that's just me. It's also possible that both decisions have very surface level excitement, right? Like, of course I want to have a different house. Like, that would be the most exciting thing. So it's not the surface, and it's very normal to feel like I have surface level feelings of joy about both of these. And that's probably right, because you chose two options to explore. Usually people are exploring two pretty good options or three pretty good options, right? If one of them was automatically terrible, we probably wouldn't be wasting our time in this phase. So what the important thing is to keep checking back with yourself as the pre-dreaming gets a little further behind you. So, a couple hours later, you might still be thinking, oh my gosh, that is the most exciting. I'm so excited. I feel so much joy about that dream. But then what about 5 hours later? What about that next night? What about the following morning? Start to pay attention to more of those deep feelings. Ignatius calls these feelings consolation, feeling consoled, feeling close to God. For me, consolation feels like a deep feeling of peace. And then the opposite is this deep feeling of desolation. For me, and I think this is a good question to ask trusted spiritual friends and spiritual directors. What do these feelings feel like to you? For me, desolation, I just feel uneasy. I feel unsettled. Something just feels off to me. I have anxiety, so I get anxiety, and that's not necessarily related to each decision. So for me, I have to pay attention, like, okay, is this my just normal anxiety, or is this an anxiety that's related to this decision? And for the most part, it's just, I can't feel settled with a decision. Something just feels off is the best way I can describe it for me. So there are some questions that we can use when we're thinking about, like, which of these, what am I looking at here? Am I looking at consolation? Am I looking at desolation? And I'll share these with Kara to share with everyone. But some of the questions that we have in Ignatian spirituality, when we're looking at consolation, would be things like, which of these dreams leave me with holy desires? I like this one, which leaves me with a sense of closeness to God. I like this one, which leaves me filled with faith or hope or love. Which make me want to go out and proclaim them to the world. This is a big difference that Mark Thibodeaux talks about. In Consolation, you often feel very motivated to share this with your trusted friends and mentors. I am so excited about this. I want to go share this. I need to tell Kara about this idea, right? Like that is a sign of consolation. This is the one that I feel the most probably is this sense of deep down peace and tranquility, a sense of righteousness. Mark Thibodeaux describes it as fits like a glove sort of feeling. And then desolation, which leaves me without faith, without hope, without love. Which one leaves you feeling, I can't? Which leaves me without a sense of God's closeness. Do you feel like maybe when you compare the two, can you sense one where God felt closer than the other? This is the one that I describe it as disquieted and agitated. Like which one just leaves me feeling in that way, even though on the surface it still might seem exciting, but deep down like, just something isn't right. Which leaves me with no passion and zeal, or with a sense of boredom and tepidity, with no energy, although many of us busy people, which leaves me feeling deflated, which fills me with a deep down anxiety and fear. Again, not surface level, I'm scared of change, because that could be both of them, right? But deep down. And then which are the dreams I'm not very excited to talk about with my mentors and companions? Which are the ones that I avoid even mentioning to them? And these are those trusted people, right? Like we're not going to maybe tell the barista at our coffee shop this new risky idea that we're thinking of, but think about those really trusted. Think about your like sit shoulder to shoulder person. Which one of these are you feeling most excited to share with those really trusted people? And which one do you feel like, maybe not? Feelings of consolation and desolation come with practice in recognizing them. It comes with, again, we need to circle back to that first phase and that getting quiet and the silence, learning to experience those feelings within yourself. You can't ask your trusted person, which one of these am I feeling? Is this consolation or desolation, honey? Like this comes from us being able to notice this. And that is not something that we have been trained in. For many of us, this is the first time we've had to start to really, wait, you mean I have to pay attention to my deep down feelings, those feelings that God is putting in me. We aren't raised figuring that out. And this might be new for some of us. It comes with practice. And this is when it's really beautiful in discernment to have a spiritual companion or a spiritual director that you can talk to some of these things about and have them help you see those differences and what you're feeling. But it also loops back to getting quiet, experiencing those movements of Christ and sitting with them, journaling, paying attention. I tell my students, after you pray dream, jot down some of those feelings. As you're going about your really busy day, you don't have all day to sit and examine these feelings of consolation and desolation. I know you don't, but keep your journal with you. And when something kind of passes by you and you notice, jot it down. And then when you do have time in the evening, sit back down with those and think about them more deeply. It involves learning to trust and listen to those movements in ourselves. And this takes practice. And it takes an investment in ourselves. And it takes giving ourselves permission to know that God is moving in us and that we can work with God. We can walk with God to figure those feelings out. And inviting him into the process from the start to the finish is what makes this so beautiful, because this isn't something we're doing on our own. I want to share with you as we close here, I want to share a beautiful prayer by Thibodeaux and St. And one of my companions in my spiritual direction practicum, Pierre de Chardin, was her spiritual giant, which is such a beautiful part of that spiritual direction program. So I get to learn about him, and he was quite an amazing human. And I love this prayer for all of us as we enter into 2022, and as we start to look at discernment differently, as we start to invite God into our questions and our dreaming and our wondering. And I would love to share this with you as we step into a different way in 2022. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet, it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances acting on your own goodwill, will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming within you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. Amen.
Anna, thank you so much. That was absolutely beautiful. And I would love if when you send me all of these resources, if you could include that last bit that you just read as well. I'd love to be able to share that with everyone, because I know, at least for me, I want to like take that up on my bathroom mirror or something, because that's fantastic. Yep. So thank you so much. I'm going to open it up for questions if anyone has any questions, but I know I want to be respectful of people's time. So if you aren't able to hang around, totally fine. I did want to share with you all that if you did not see yet in your email inbox, we will be having a free retreat next month. On February 5th and 6th. So if you enjoyed this fabulous workshop with Anna, I hope that you'll be able to come to that as well. Our theme is finding peace, embracing Christ in a season of liminality. And if you're not familiar with liminality, it's very much this idea of feeling in between, not yet in that big, new season. I think a lot of times those seasons of liminality are where this discernment process happens, right? Where you're kind of in that ordinary everyday moments of life, before another big life change. So if you have experienced those seasons in the past or are in one now, we'd love for you to join us for that. There will be some live components like this. We'll be gathering on Saturday night for some group Lectio Divina and faith sharing. And then on Sunday for a wonderful talk on liminality from one of our fabulous writers and event coordinator, Adrian Stravich. So, and then additionally, there'll be some kind of things that you can pray with on your own in a retreat packet, just at, whatever pockets of time work for you over the course of that weekend. So we'll have more information about that coming out. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you all for spending your Saturday morning with us. And I want to once again thank Anna for just, offering us so much of your wisdom and knowledge, and just being that vessel for the Holy Spirit as we all seek to discern what God is calling us to in our lives. So yes, thank you all for joining us. And if anyone has questions for Anna, are you okay to hang out just for a few minutes? Yep. Awesome. All right, any questions?
Katie, yes.
Let
I don't have
me,
I don't
Yep.
have a question because I can't think of anything specifically. I just want to say how wonderful this was and to thank you, Anna. And it's amazing how you can distill such a big idea and big concepts into such actionable concepts. But again, how you were able to, again, make it, tailor it for all the ages, all the stages. And I hope that more people are able to experience your goodness. And thank you, Kara, for setting this up for us.
Thank you so much. You guys are so sweet.
yes, thank you, Katie. And thank you for being here.
Mm.
Any other questions or comments?
So Anna, when you're talking about phase 2, as someone who often lets my anxiety run with all of the thousands of ideas, how do you kind of narrow those ideas down in a way that's constructive and helpful, and you're not listening to the negative voices in your head? Or I love the point that you brought up of don't rule anything out too quickly.
Yes.
My husband and I use the phrase like no bad ideas, like have a phase of like no bad ideas, but because I'm very quick to jump to phase 3 and rule things out. But I love the idea of post notes, but do you have any other suggestions on productive idea brainstorming and just allowing yourself to sit in that space?
I love inviting God to sit with you when you are making a list. So even if you've already got some great ideas and you've already started brainstorming, then kind of inviting God into that space, like setting aside a separate time and saying, okay, this is my prayerful time. And knowing yourself, being able to figure out, is it a list of 20 or is that too many for me? Like, is that going to push me way over the limit? Do I need a list of 5? Maybe you've already done this elaborate listing and are feeling overwhelmed by the number of possibilities. So you would be on the opposite side of someone who says, I got A and I got B. You've got like several alphabets full and that's too many to go into. So I think at that point, going into kind of a prayerful time with a blank paper with a list of 5, just number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's almost like you're doing a little mini Lectio Divina on your list, right? Like allowing yourself to see what rises up off of that list. And there's no rule that says you can't. These are very fluid stages. So if your list of 5, you step into the next thing and you're like, oh, I really liked X from this list, go back and grab it, right? Like this is not, you don't have to burn the list when you're done with choosing your 5. But I would say for someone who, when there's too many options, it can be overwhelming, would be to sit down, list of 5, do a little Lectio Divina on your list, see what you notice rising up from that list that you're curious about or that you're excited about. I love the idea of like, kind of following a thread, like which one of those makes you want to say like, ooh, what would that be? And kind of pulling that and then starting with those 5. And part of gathering data is also that conversation phase. So pulling in spiritual director or spiritual friend or companion or partner with those 5 and saying, let's talk through these for a little while. And then again, see what rises up out of that moves into the next stage. But they're fluid stages. So feel free to go back and grab one and try it out. You don't get to just go through the 4 and then you're done. So feel free to move back and forth. But I would say bring it into a prayer time of almost like a Lectio Divina and just try to be as open to those movements as you can, like you would be with a verse in Lectio Divina where you have no idea what's going to necessarily rise up to you, and just see what comes out of it. See what 5 or 3 come out of that are manageable for you to move into the next phase.
That was a great question, Lauren, and a fantastic answer. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
all the questions are going to come in spiritual direction, aren't they? I can see it. You guys are saving them. They're like, ooh, I got an appointment next week.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Anna. Thank you everyone for being here. I know we have some of our ministry team members on this call. So if any of you have logistical questions for me about upcoming projects and due dates, I'll hang out for a little bit. But otherwise, everyone's free to go enjoy their Saturday. So thank you again to all of you. And please know that I'll be holding all of you in prayer today and throughout the week ahead as we all seek to discern what the Lord is calling us to in 2022. So
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Kara, we pray for you that you all feel better.
Thank you. I so appreciate that.
Bye, everyone.